here with Jon Morris. He's the founder and CEO of Ramsay Innovations, and Jon is a serial entrepreneur. He is going to be talking with us about financial insights, about budgeting, forecasting philosophy, analyzing your KPIs, and having insights-driven finance for the success of your business. So, Jon, glad to be talking to you.
Thank you, Robert. So excited to be here today.
And I'm excited to have you. And so if someone said, all right, what is Ramsay Innovations all about? What is Mr. Jon Morris all about? What makes you stand out from the crowd? What's unique about you?
So previous to finding Ramsay Innovations, I founded an agency called Rise Interactive. I grew it to just me to one of the largest independent digital agencies in the world. And exited that in 2020. And this is a cool fact. There's 120,000 agencies just here in the United States. And what I explained is, you asked me what differentiates you. How was I able to scale Rise as a generalist agency when so many other companies struggle doing it? And the trick was budgeting and forecasting. So this is a long way of getting your answer, but based on that results, what I realized is a lot of other agency owners could use help in understanding how to spend their time and their money more intelligently, more effectively. And the key to doing that is by having a strong budgeting and forecasting methodology. And so that's what stands out from us and what makes us a little bit more unique.
Budgeting and forecasting, planning for the future. What a concept. And so what does that look like? I mean, how detailed of a budget and forecast is it? And like, how do you even begin to wrap your head around something that it sounds complex when you're talking about it, right? It sounds like a detailed plan. So what does it look like and how do you brainstorm that?
Well, it starts off with just 4 simple goals: a revenue goal, a profit goal, a cash goal that is generally neglected and not thought about, but you can do really cool things when you start building up your cash. And then what I call is an infrastructure goal. And the idea is that you want your business to be better 1 year from now than it is today. But I want you to do it with purpose and have deliberate planning behind it. So that could be that you need to invest in your recruiting infrastructure because you can't handle the leads that are coming in. Or it could be that you need to build your sales and marketing infrastructure because you're not getting enough leads coming through. So the idea is that you think about the problems that you want to solve and that you put those into your plan. And so now you know how to budget for it and make sure you spend your time as intelligently as possible. Then you need to get granular. So like when I say revenue, a lot of people come to me as like, I want to do this much revenue. And then I was like, okay, well, let's start looking at all of your existing clients. And, let's just say that comes up to $2 million. And then we'll look at, how much clients you win historically in a given year, and you win 1 new client a month. And that's another $1 million, and you're doing around 3 million. And someone says, I want to do 9 million. I was like, well, the reality is that like when you look at all these inputs, your sales and marketing is not going to be large enough to add an incremental $6 million, but maybe we could get you to 3.5, or maybe we could get you to 4. And so it's really looking at what you've done historically, what you're going to do different in sales and marketing, what you're going to do different to keep your existing customers. And that allows you to determine the investments that you need to make.
Fantastic. You when you hear about planning and goal setting, I'm sure you've seen sometimes people just think of a number or think of a goal. And what's great about your thought process, you're saying, well, here's the inputs, and based on this starting number, and then what you'll do and what kind of difficulties you anticipate on the path to getting there, then here's what the output will be. And that's a way more logical, predictable, and saner way to think this through, as far as just saying, like, instead of just picking a goal, throwing out numbers, then you're saying, well, let's think this through logically about where you are now and then what activities you'll take to get there. And so to kind of keep the conversation like fun and interesting and exciting, do you have any fun like stories explaining you taking a company through this process? Because like, thinking about the how-to, that's cool, but then just like the excitement, the start to finish, the storytelling part, that's what really gets me to pay attention. So what sort of stories do you have as far as you working your magic, working your secret sauce?
I can give you 3 stories, depending on how much time we have. But the first story is someone about 1.5 years ago came to me and they were losing money. They had debt. And, basically just said, it's like, look, I'll just sleep better at night if I just make a few $1,000s a month in profit. And He's like, I'll be better to my wife. I'll be better to my kids. Like, I'm just stressed all the time because I have debt, I'm losing money, and I need someone to help and guide me through that process. So they implemented what we call the Ramsay way, which is our methodology of budgeting and forecasting. And, within a year, we have wiped out all their debt. They're now profitable every single month. They know exactly what metrics they need to do. And this person literally sleeps better at night, is better to their wife, better to their kids because of the impact of their budgeting and forecasting process. Another example, one of the things we teach people is like what gross margin is, what your gross margin should be, how much you should spend on sales and marketing as a percent of revenue, operations and finance as a percent of revenue, executive as a percent of revenue. And very similar story, company was losing money, they had debt, they still have debt. But in January of this year, for their first time ever, they were able to hit all the metrics we wanted to achieve. So over 50% gross margin, over 20% in EBITDA. They now are chipping away at their debt, plan to be by the end of 2024 completely debt-free. And so we've really helped stabilize those businesses. I have another scenario where a company's doing incredibly well, $5 million business, 60% gross margins. And gross margin, by the way, is when you take your revenue minus all of the work that takes to do your client work, so payroll, et cetera, which I call cost of service, whatever's left over is your gross margin. If you're in your 30% range, you're going to lose money. If I could get you into the 40, you'll start making money. And if I get you over 50, you can invest substantially. This company right out of the gate was at 60% gross margin, which looks great. But when you started to peel away the onion, what we found out is that only one of their services was profitable. So it was subsidizing all of the other groups of their business. And so they were actually losing money in their programmatic, they were losing money on their social. And so now we're able to develop a strategy where each different business unit has to stand on its own 2 feet and it has to be able to survive. It can't live off of another group from a profitability standpoint. So those are 3 just different examples of how we've been able to help people steer their finances in the right direction.
Those are all 3 awesome stories. I love the way you think, especially where even as you're saying those things, my imagination is like kind of creating different like boxes and values in the boxes. Yeah. And it seems like, so in that first story, what really hit hard for me was that your client said, not only do I want to turn my business around and not only do I want to get these numbers at these points, but he was saying, I want to sleep at night. And that seemed to be really powerful for me, that not only did he have a goal, but he said, well, here's the reason why I want this goal to be. So that way I kind of have additional motivation when the going gets tough in order to, put in those long hours or make those difficult decisions in order to get the goal there. And then what's also interesting about kind of hearing about your problem solving techniques here is that there's like the big primary goal. And then it seems like with you, there's like smaller secondary goals that are maybe more doable, more manageable. And then you can maybe focus on those individual things, knowing that like if all 4 of these sub goals were in place, then the big goal would work out. But then it's more doable to say, let's focus on number 1 and number 2, et cetera, instead of just like focusing on like the big insurmountable problem.
So I agree with that. What I would also say is a lot of times when people come to us, they don't even like a lot of people go in the agency space because they're creative or they're good at marketing, but it's not because they were solid at finance. They're like, I want to have the best financial infrastructure ever. And so what we teach them is what are the numbers that matter and how do you organize your data to answer those questions? Then I can get into those micro goals that you're talking about. But first thing is, let's just put you in a good position so that you can actually understand what those are. And then we can help you start achieving your goals.
And you hear about that sometimes, right? Of like talking to the data, or what story does the data tell, and asking the right questions and kind of understanding from the mess of the raw numbers into what are you looking for it to happen and what's it telling you back as far as where it's at. And just so it all makes me wonder, like, how do we all tap into your excitement and your energy as far as the money and the numbers and the accounting. It seems like you're kind of tuned into something that some people might think is like boring or tune out, but there's something about just the way you're talking about this that kind of makes you come alive. So how do we pick up on that, and how do we get excited about planning and budgeting where we might be dreading it or have this bad negativity baggage? How do we get excited like you do?
Okay, let's take the numbers aside. What people get excited about should be one of two things. Either they need to stabilize their business, or if their business is stabilized, they want to scale and grow their business. All we're doing is helping you determine what is important to you. Let me give you an example. If you came to me as like, John, I really want to grow faster. I'm going to ask you one simple question. Cool. What percent of your revenue do you spend on sales and marketing? Now, if you come back to me as like, well, I don't spend any money on sales and marketing, I was like, well, then growth really isn't important to you. And so when you start taking the numbers away and start saying, what you spend your money on is what's important to you, it changes your mindset. Okay. It's like, oh, you're right. I do want to grow faster and I'm spending no money on sales and marketing. Maybe I should spend some money on sales and marketing. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And so the idea of the budgeting process is not the boring minutia part. No one enjoys that. Maybe I do because I'm a little weird. But besides me, what people enjoy is the outcomes that it gets. Are you familiar with like traction or EOS?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So there's so many agency owners I meet where they've come up with their 10-year goal and their 3-year goal and their 1-year goal. And then I asked them, I was like, great, did you budget your 1-year goal? And the answer was no, because they don't tie the budgeting process to the goal setting exercise. And so what I explained is that all we're going to do is help you come up with that same list of 1-year goals. And now we're going to say, okay, well, let's get into the budget. If you say that, you want to improve your recruiting substantially, well, then you need to hire a recruiter, or maybe you need to hire an outside consulting firm that helps you build a recruiting process. But the idea is that it's not the minutia, it's the making sure that you're prioritizing what's important to you. I always say that everyone has a strategic plan, whether they know it or not. It's what they choose to spend their money on. And it can't be a goal unless you spend money against it.
That's one of those hard questions, and it seems like you're all about asking the hard questions, that especially like so you think, oh, I don't have a plan. Well, you do have a plan. It's just in your head and it's keeps changing, and it's a bad plan, and the bad plan in place, and guess where you're going to end up. And so it was also interesting there with you thinking about or coming up with that idea of, well, are you either headed towards stability first? And then if not, then stability is where you're where you should be headed. And then if you're stable, then focus more on the growth. And like, you're making me think back to, I saw some like Gary Vaynerchuk video once where he was just like at some meetup and talking to someone, and he was like giving advice. And Gary V asked this random person, like, well, you have these goals, right? There's somewhere where you want to end up. And Gary said, do you need help in figuring out the goal, or do you just want to get to the goal faster? And that really like made a lot of sense to me of like, okay, are you kind of trying to figure out the path to get there, or just do you need to increase the speed and pour more gasoline on the fire? And it seems like maybe I'm sure that's like a common mistake, right? Of using the wrong gasoline for the incorrect purpose, and saying like, well, I just want to go on a hiring spree and a spending spree, and you saying, well, your house is not in order yet.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. It's understanding A, where you want to go, and then B, how you're going to get there. And once again, it's okay if you don't know how you're going to get there, then let's budget a consultant to come in to tell you how to get there. One of the things I mentioned this earlier, there's 120,000 agencies in the United States, which I'm just going to repeat that. There are 120,000 agencies in the United States, which means that no matter what you do as an agency owner, there are at least another 1,000 that do exactly the same thing. So I always ask people what differentiates you, and 99% of the time, they don't really have a differentiator. And so, working with them to start thinking about where their differentiation is, I generally am recommending, there are experts out there that can help you with your positioning and how to think about it. And there's people who are experts in how to market to those, that group once you figure out how you're going to differentiate yourself. But it requires budgeting. It requires you to figure out how you're going to spend your time and money to make that happen.
And so would you say, is there like a number one mistake that you see business owners making? Is it this differentiating issue? Is it not budgeting? Like, what do you see that just many of these 120,000 agencies are doing that just really grinds your gears, really pisses you off? You say, too many people are making this mistake. So how can we be aware of it and how can we avoid it?
So the first thing that agency owners need to understand is, what is their gross margin? And I'm gonna explain once again, because there's three different things you need to know. So the first thing is, what is your revenue? Which sounds really simple, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't know what their revenue is. When I talk about revenue, I talk about net revenue. It does not include any pass-through, it doesn't include any media. It is the true fees that you collect. The second number you need to know is your cost of service. How much does it cost you to support the clients that you have brought on? And so if you are at a 30%, and so your revenue or your net revenue minus your cost of service is your gross margin. If you are at a 30% gross margin, you will not make money. If you're at a 40% gross margin, you will start to make money, but you will have no money to invest in the business. And if you're at a 50% gross margin, you will make money and you have money to invest in the business. So I've audited hundreds of agencies' financials. 95% of them have no idea what their gross margin is. So it's the most important metric to know. Everyone should know it cold, and they should have a path to how they're going to continually improve that number. As you improve that number, and you got to improve it, and I'm going to tell you the challenge of improving it. You cannot improve it by not delivering for your customers. It'll be like, hey, I'm just going to stop doing work for them and they'll pay me and I'll have a higher gross margin. And you can't improve it by screwing over your employees and working them to death. So your employees have to have a great work-life balance, and you have to deliver a really high quality product to your customers. And if you can do those two things, then and have a 50% gross margin or greater, you're going to have a wonderful business that's going to allow you to make investments. It's going to allow you to scale. It's going to allow you to grow.
I really like your simplicity, and especially of reducing it to this one KPI, saying, are you at 30%, 40%, or 50%, to then be able to examine your options and figure out some decisions and just figure out how to increase that number and figure out where you can go from there. And then kind of like think more big picture instead of just doing the day-to-day, putting out fires, kind of like, thinking towards the future and being more optimistic and saying like, what are we going to do to grow this thing instead of just hanging on, instead of just surviving. And so I imagine that the remaining agencies out there, like you said, like they don't know these numbers going in cold, and they should, and they haven't done just kind of the grinding it out, doing the work on the numbers, so that way they can just like have these easily accessible metrics. And then that way, the decisions and the planning is easier, less stress, better focus, and everything that comes from that. So if someone says, okay, a lot of what Jon said on this podcast made a lot of sense, but we know that a podcast is just a limited window of time to give us some ideas, to give us a taste. So if they say, I want to dig into more of what Jon provides, how does an agency know if they're a good fit for you, and where do they go, and what will they find out when they look up your website?
So a couple of things. As I mentioned before, the Ramsay Way is our methodology. We're actually launching next week a SaaS product that allows you to manage your own budgeting and forecasting and learn our system and implement it. So if you're interested in being an alpha customer, we're looking for alpha customers. You can reach out to me at jon@ramsayinnovations.com, jon@ramsayinnovations.com. I also post regularly for agency owners on best practices for finances. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can go to our website, ramsayinnovations.com. And then the last one is we have a Facebook group called the Ramsay Way, where we talk about budgeting and forecasting for agencies, and you connect with me on the Facebook group as well.
Fantastic. So to recap some of that, Ramsay Innovations, Ramsay with an A. So that's RAMSAY, innovations.com. Jon at RamsayInnovations.com. So you're coming out with the Ramsay Way. And what is the name of that Facebook group again?
It's called the Ramsay Way.
Okay.
So real simple name, if you can remember Ramsay.
Right. The Ramsay Way on that Facebook group, and Jon at RamsayInnovations.com to check out what Jon and his company have going on with that SaaS product to just help you make more sense of what you're doing, make better decisions, less stress, and better action. So as we are wrapping up our conversation here, Jon, the sound bites are always fun, right? The quotes, the lessons. So is there any really like profound piece of advice that you can think of and pull out of your back pocket? Is there something that you wish someone had told you 10 or 20 years ago, or something that has really stuck with you that's helped you out that you can pass along? What comes to mind?
I'm going to give two things. So the first thing is take a data-driven approach to running your business. So learn the metrics that are necessary to have a successful business. And the second one is oftentimes you're not going to like what the metrics are going to tell you. And you have to have the courage to make the tough decisions to implement what the data tells you to do. So much of what I found is what sucks about running a professional service firm is that 80% of your costs are people. They're people you love, they're people you care about, they're people you have emotional attachment to. But you have to do the job of what the numbers tell you to do. And I found that that's where a lot of people struggle.
And it might be a struggle now, but you get the wake up call now instead of later, get the problem solved, and then you can be maybe unhappy now or maybe in shock, but then happy later once you get this problem solved and once you are aware of it. So very nice advice, Jon. And we will see everyone at RamsayInnovations.com. Go there now. And I appreciate you very much, Mr. Jon Morris from Ramsay Innovations, for showing up and giving us all kinds of new light bulb moments and many things to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Plank.